I don't find that we are that expensive, but you know, each to their own. Hello my beautiful people, welcome back to another video. I hope you guys are all doing well. It is a very cold weekend in Durban this week. That's why I'm dressed back in winter clothing. It's so sad. I'm so excited for summer to eventually hit. And if you are new onto my channel, I would love it if you subscribed and joined this beautiful group of people. As you can see from the title of this week's video, I'm going to be sitting down with you and discussing how us interior designers price for each project. And I thought this topic was a very important one, as much as I really do not like discussing money. I don't know why. It's just something that I've always been uncomfortable discussing, but yeah, I think it's very, very important, just so that everyone is kind of on the same page, and that you also understand why it's so difficult for us designers to give you a fee on the spot. I'll go into what the kind of things we look at, and I'll also just be basing the fees on interior designers. I'm not going to go into decorators. So without further ado, let's begin this week's video. Okay, so like I mentioned, it is so difficult for us designers to give you kind of a base fee, professional fee, because there are so many factors that we have to consider. It's not a cookie cut kind of scenario. We can just give you a flat base fee. There are 3 different types of fees that us designers can use. But choosing the most appropriate fee structure for a project really depends on a few variables, such as the client's brief. Client's brief would include the scale of the project. Are we looking at just designing 3 rooms in a house, or a penthouse apartment, or a massive standalone home? The next thing we consider is the project's complexity. So project complexity is how much work you need to be done. Are we just doing your floor finishes and maybe some ceilings, or are you wanting us to gut out the whole internal shell and redo it completely? And then we'd also consider things like your specification, whether you are looking at doing something kind of cost effective or something that is super luxe. When we're looking at a super luxe renovation or new build, that usually goes hand in hand with how heavily detailed the project will be. Budgets limit the level of detailing that one can achieve, because it limits the level of laborer that you would get. So most of our average laborers in South Africa can't achieve a high to medium spec in terms of detailing and finish and quality. So yeah, that's why I'm saying specification is so important, because that would give us an indication, if you're going super luxe, that you are going to have maybe the most expensive laborers and contractor, which means very high details, which also indicates the type of floor finishes that you would go for. Whereas if you are entry level, you might not be looking at marble tops and floors. You would probably be looking at your porcelain tiles, for instance, and with that comes with different details and different sets of skills. So hopefully that makes sense when it comes to specification, because that it really influences largely what the end product will be. And that goes nicely into the level of detailing. So once we've established what kind of specification you're looking for, that will also influence to some degree the level of detailing. Obviously, the level of detailing is also influenced by the homeowner, the developer, the end user. Let me just call them the end user or the client. And the last one would be the level of responsibility, which is a bit of a which is one that I've learned with time. And what I mean by level of responsibility is there are some clients who want to take on the project themselves on sort of a project management kind of level, or a contractor type of level. So you just basically handing them a stage 3 design development document, which gives them the conceptual design or the design with not much detail, and they are going to go around finding various people to implement your design. So those 5 factors I think are important to ask your client in order to establish which fee structure suits the project. Okay, so there are 3 different fee structures that one can look at or one can use. And the first one would be on an hourly based fee. The second one is a square meter rate. And then the last one is a percentage based fee. So I'm going to start off with the hourly fee, which is something that I don't think many people use, to be honest. I could be wrong, but from my experience working in this industry for about 6 years, I've never used that. In the companies I've worked for, they've never ever used that unless it's a deviation from the initial brief, then they would charge hourly. Hourly is pretty self-explanatory. You would agree on hours with your client beforehand, before starting the project, which I find difficult because it's like with design, it is pretty much endless in terms of like how long you would spend on working on a project or a detail. Like there's a lot of like figuring out that goes into a design project. So I would rather not choose an hourly rate because you are more likely to undersell your hours than oversell them, if you know what I mean. I've based this video not just from my own experience, but also from the IID, which is the African Institute of Interior Design. They have broken it up into years of experience. If you have been a professional from 1 to 3 years, you can charge an hourly rate of less than 500 Rand. If you are between the years of 4 to 10, you can charge between 500 to 950 Rand an hour. If you have more than 10 years of experience, you can charge anything above 950. And the nice thing is, if you go on this website, it breaks it down year by year what the actual fee is, which is, I think, very, very helpful. And if anyone disputes it, you can direct them to the IID. Let's move on because I'm speaking for far too long. Per square meter rate one. That one's quite a new one to me, I won't lie. Ever since I left the company I used to work at, I had to actually use this method to projects just because I assessed what the client's brief was and their requirements and the complexity and the scope of the project, and it made more sense for me to apply a square meter rate versus what I'm used to, which is the last one, the percentage of the construction fee. And the nice thing again about the IID, it gives you a full breakdown of how to get to a accurate square meter rate. So every output, which would be a drawing, a detail, a mood board, a sample board, has been given a rate per square meter. So typically I've just gone and looked and said, typically in projects that I'm used to working on, I would definitely have a mood and sample board. So that's 20 Rand. I would definitely be producing 3Ds and that amounts to 40 Rand. I would definitely do space planning with your floor finishes, your ceiling layouts, any other typical layouts like bathroom layouts in a space, and that corresponds to 40 Rand a square meter. I'd obviously produce elevations and sections, and that's 20 Rand. And then mechanical layouts, that's typical, but it's not always, because some projects, like for instance, you might not have HVAC layouts. Your air conditioning units or ducted AC, or like if you have a bathroom doesn't have a window, you would need it to be mechanically ventilated. Sometimes most bathrooms do have access to a window that opens outside, so you might not always deal with a project that has mechanical layouts. That one is a 15 Rand per square meter rate. And then the spec documents, which would be all your floor finishes, your paint colors, your ceiling paint color, every single fitting in the house, from your sandware to your lighting to your electrical, and so on and so forth. And that is 80 Rand per square meter. So if you use those 6 outputs as your standard rate, it comes to 215 Rand a square meter. And this does not include details, by the way, because details, which is an expensive one, is 2,500 Rand per drawing. So that is a pricey one. So I've decided to take my parents' house that I've just recently renovated as an example when we're applying this square meter rate, so you guys can understand how much the square meter rate can be for a project. So I've just taken the ground floor, which is 223 square meters. And because we didn't need any mechanical layouts, the fee would have been 200 Rand a square meter, excluding the technical details. Our total for all the layouts and all the basic drawing work would be 44,600 Rand. And if we include the details, and I roughly just like quickly calculated how many details I had. I don't think this was an accurate number. I think it was slightly higher than this. And we had about 42 details. And if we take those 42 details and we times them by the detail rate, which is 2,500 Rand, that comes up to, just for the details, it comes up to 105,000 Rand. Our grand total for just the first floor on a square meter rate base would be 149,600 Rand. The square meter rate definitely works out to be quite expensive for the client. Obviously great for us as designers, because then we'd be raking in a lot of money. But obviously this arrangement has to be fair for everyone, and we don't want our careers and our skills to be so niche that no one can afford to use us. I know that a lot of people don't use the 2,500 Rand per detail rate as a rate. Instead of applying maybe a 215 square meter rate, they would apply 250 or 280 or even 400 Rand, just depending on again how complex the project is. So if you know that there's going to be a lot of details, maybe instead of only applying like the 215 square meter rate, you would apply a 400 or 500 square meter rate, because they're going to be a lot of details. Details can go up to 80, 100 details, and at the rate of 2,500 Rand, it really would be unaffordable for a lot of people to pay that amount. That basically covers the square meter rate. The last one is a percentage based fee, and that's the one that I'm most familiar with. In both the companies that I worked with previously, they used the percentage fee because they were architects, so that's basically what architects use. And if we look at the IID again, because we're using that as our guideline, they also follow the same principles as SACAP when they use the percentage method. A percentage of the construction cost. Construction cost would be your material and your labor costs together, and we would apply a percentage to that. This percentage fee is based off of whether your project is either low complexity, medium complexity, or high complexity, and there's an associated percentage based off of one of the three. So the IID have simplified the above, and they've kept the main principle from the SACAP. If you have a project that is in the low to medium complexity range, you should charge a percentage of between 11 and 15%. If you have a project that's between the medium to large complexity scale, you can charge anything between 7 and 10% range. And then if you have a project that starts off at a large complexity to super large, is that even you know what I mean? Then your percentage that you can charge is between 3 to 6%. With the low complexity, obviously that corresponds to a monetary value. And that means that the low complexity project would have a lower construction total. So hence the percentage is slightly higher. Your largest kind of complexity would yield a higher construction total. Then the percentage is lower, because if the construction fee is 100 million, then you would charge like 3% of that total, and you'll still make a very decent salary. Whereas on your lower end, if their project is, let's say, under 1 million, you would charge a slightly higher percentage, even up to like 15%, and still at least maintain a decent salary for your work and your skill set. So with the percentage based fee, you aren't obliged as the client, you're not going to pay the full sum up front nor will you even pay 50% of the sum upfront. The base fee is further broken down into the design stages, which I've spoken about before, the 6 design stages. Each design stage has a specific percentage of the total fee payable over several months. So for instance, if we take stage 3, and you have assessed the project and you know it's going to take about 3 months or 2 months to implement stage 3, let's just say 3 months, and stage 3 is 20% of your total fee as the designer. Let's say your fee is 100,000 Rand, and so from 100,000 and apply the 20%, you would get 20,000, and then you divide that by 3 and you get 6,666 with 66 cents. So that's how much you would earn in per month for those 3 months, and then the same method is applied for the rest of the stages. Oh, and also the square meter rate, you can also apply the same method. But the nice thing about breaking up your payments per the 6 stages is if the client decides to pull out for any given reason, your clients would be liable to pay up to whatever stage that you have completed. As well, it also gives the client the opportunity to, if they are very conscious or if they really can't afford to have a designer until construction or until the end. Like I've said before, some clients are very controlling and they want to have all the control. They can go up into stage 3 and you can do all the work up until stage 3 and then they continue onwards on their own. But the downfall, I would say, for clients who choose that method is the details. It's obviously highly recommended to have a designer throughout the whole process, because then they are able to deal with these circumstances that come up on site, and you're not left like in darkness and having to figure it out yourself, or having to rely on the contractor to do it for you and to do a aesthetically pleasing job for you. So yeah, it is very, very important to continue your designer as far as possible throughout the process. Okay, just to conclude, because this has gone on for so long. Like I've said before, the most popular method that I have been exposed to, that I'm used to, is the percentage-based fee structure, followed on with the rate per square meter. I prefer the percentage-based fee because I think it is honestly the most fair fee possible there is. I think it's also a fair representation of the output that us designers put into, so the amount of drawings or details that we put into. Because if the scope or the complexity of a project changes, so does the fee in a percentage-based scenario. So for instance, if the client came to you and they were like, oh, we're just gonna do a partial renovation, we just need X, Y, Z. But then let's say in stage 2 or stage 3, they're like, oh, actually we want to add A, B, C, D, E. And so now that changes the level of complexity or the scope of the project to something greater than what you had anticipated. And so then your fees will adjust now to what the new total construction fee will be. And so that's why I think the percentage based is the most fair fee structure out there for both the client and the designer. Whereas if you have a rate per square meter, it's pretty much fixed. And well, I don't know, I've used it twice and I've never had issues where people have never really changed their mind as to what they want to do. They've never changed the scope, so I've been lucky there. But I don't know what would happen if someone decided that they wanted to do more, if I would up the square meter rate. I don't know. But I think what I've always stipulated in all my fee proposals is if there's a change from the initial brief, and I always in my fee proposals, which is very important, to note what the client brief was, so it's in black and white, and no one can have amnesia later on and say, no, they had said this to you and now you can't remember, whatever. You get what I'm saying? There are people out there who do take advantage of situations if you aren't careful. In your fee proposal, you should always stipulate that if there is a variation in the scope or the project brief that the fees need to be revisited in some form of way. Either it's going to be charged on an hourly basis or there's going to be a new fixed fee. So just make sure you cover all your bases. So that's basically the end of this video. I hope it made sense. I know I speak a lot in circles and I speak in loops and in many ways. So I hope that was kind of clear for you guys, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope it was educational for not just my fellow interior designers or students, but also for clients who are wanting to use designers, that, you know, there are options out there, and also so that you can understand how much work goes into a project, how many details, and so why I don't find that we are that expensive, but you know, each to their own. But it is a specialized profession. It's not for everyone to have an interior designer. It is a bit of a luxury, but if you speak to your interior designer that you are hoping to employ, I definitely think there are workable ways to make it cheaper for you. I think just be open and honest with whomever you're dealing with, and you'd be surprised with how accommodating people would be. So anyways, I'm rambling again. I hope you guys enjoyed this week's video. I hope if you did, please give it a big thumbs up. If you made it this far, thank you so much for supporting me. And if you made it this far and you're not a subscriber, I think you should change that and you should subscribe right now. And I'll see you guys in another video.